We are good to go.
Wonderful. I would like to call to order the meeting of the Personnel and Administration Committee for Thursday, April, what are we, 24th, 2025. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Combs,
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderman, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Alderwoman.
Here.
Alderman Aldridge.
Present.
President Green. I'm sorry, President Green, I didn't hear you.
Present.
For present, you have quorum.
Quorum being present, I will entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes from Thursday, April 10th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Combs,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge,
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
4 aye votes.
Thank you. With that, we have no board bills or resolutions for review, but I will start with discussion item number 1, which is hiring for or opening up to hire for another executive secretary. As the board was made aware last week, Garrett is leaving for a position in the mayor's office, and we have an open executive secretary position that we need to post. And so I would like to entertain a motion from the committee to post the executive secretary position at the current salary for a minimum of 2 weeks.
So moved.
Second. Oh,
Previous roll.
President Green, I have a question regarding you said about the salary.
Yes, at the current salary level.
Okay. Okay, got it.
All right, so it was moved by the alderman from the 3rd, seconded by the alderman from the 14th. There was a request for previous roll. Hearing no objection to previous roll, motion passes. With that, we need to now discuss the hiring of some legislative assistants for the board. So with that, I would like to move to go into closed session pursuant to Missouri State Statute 610.0213 and Section 610.022 in order to discuss the hiring of employees for the Board of Aldermen.
So moved.
second. Previous roll.
Hearing no objection to previous roll, STLTV, if you could please place us in closed session. All right, moving on with our agenda, I'll take up discussion item number 2, stamps and postage. Director Ingracia will discuss on behalf of Tracy Billups. Director Ingracia.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the Personnel Committee. Tracy Billups, who's the administrative assistant, was not able to be here today, but I just wanted to bring to your attention that she has mentioned to me that the board is running out of stamps. One of the things we'll be discussing further along in the agenda is the renovation projects that we are considering for fiscal year 2025. The biggest reason we have such a large pot of money left over is because aldermen have not been utilizing Multigraph, which is the city's in-house print shop, to send out mailings. And so Tracy, I guess, has been going through some. I know I gave her the ones that I had left from when I was an alderperson. I'm not sure where she's been getting the other ones, but at some point, personnel will need to make a decision about whether or not to purchase stamps. I will work with her because I unfortunately don't have the information about how many stamps per month she thinks she needs. But stamps right now are about they are 73 cents per stamp. And the Multigraph print shop gives us a lower rate. But I do think it would be important to have some stamps on hand for just one-off mailings if you just have a few versus 20, 50, 100 or more.
Is there any questions or discussion from the committee?
What do you mean, like, one-off mailings? Like, is that coming from the board budget, or are we talking about the individual aldermanic stamp accounts?
You don't have individual stamp accounts anymore.
So, well, how do we,
That money was decided by personnel to be moved into the internal services line item in the budget, so that each alderman had an allocation to utilize multigraph when they needed to mail, because it's cheaper. I understand why maybe if you just have one thing you need to mail or two things or something, you might not want to go through multigraph. But nobody has utilized multigraph, I think, except for the president's office.
So I guess the question I have is, has there been any thought or pricing out just getting a postage machine for the board for those types of one-off, mailings that, sometimes you just need to send a get well card or something to a constituent, or a piece of information to a small number of constituents instead of sending, something in bulk. Would it be possible to do some kind of just postage machine that we?
Sure,
I don't
I'd be
have
happy to look into that. The last time we had the conversation, the personnel committee decided to utilize multigraph since they already have one. But I would be happy to do that. And I, again, apologize. I'll work with Tracy to make sure that we have more information for the committee. I didn't realize I was going to be talking about this today until right before the meeting.
There any further discussion? Questions from members?
We're
I
not
have
taking-
my hand up. I have my hand up.
Alderwoman Boyd.
I have a question I'm like Alderman Cone in regards to the multi-graph. So how was that done? Because what do you send things to them to do mass mailings from your ward? So is it a limit, or is it a budget for that, or how does that work?
That's how it's been in the past, because there was a line item in the budget for internal services for the past 2 budget years. I believe that line item was cut since we had to shave down our budget pursuant to the budget director to make sure that we were able to pay for everything we needed to. So yes, there had been multiple communications that went out in the past about the process by which you would utilize multigraph. Does that answer your question, Alderwoman?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of concerned because when I do mailings for the ward, I take it out of my account, and I not from the Board of Aldermen. I take it out of my account and I just send the mailings out. So that's why I was asking, is it a certain budget that we have that we're supposed to utilize to do the mailings? Because and I'm looking at the way they reduced it to 14 wards and you have more people to reach. It seems like it should be something in regards to communication to the constituents, and I just don't believe everybody can get to every door. So multi-graph is great, but I'm just trying to figure out, I'm just trying to figure that out and map that out, how that would look. So Shane, did you use multigraph in the past with that for that?
So I use multigraph for the printing of good neighbor guides, but I did not use them for postage. But and my apologies, I thought we were operating underneath, similar to the good neighbor guides, that there was
Right.
somewhat of an allocated budget for each alder person with respect to it. So it would have been in a line item for the entire board over at multigraph, but then there would have been kind of individual accounts, if you will, set up for each alder person in terms of the amount of postage that they would have been allotted. One thing that I was still unclear about, and I'm not sure if we ever got to a resolution on it, but it was a concern of mine, which was if we go over to the postal meter, system, in the past, we would have been able to accumulate postage to be able to do larger mailers. Whereas if, with the meters, if we only have a certain allotment per year, are we able to roll that over from each fiscal year into another? Because, sometimes we're told yes, sometimes we're told no. Board of Public Service, obviously with Ward Capital, we have pools of money that are still delimited by each fiscal year, and you spend down money in those fiscal years, and then the new fiscal year amounts are available too. But on any given project, it's based off of whatever's allocated in that year stays in that fund bucket until it's spent down. So I was thinking that the postage would operate kind of similarly, but it doesn't sound like it is. It's just in one, account for the board, and then we're kind of self-policing it.
Right.
No.
That's why I
No,
asked the
there's-
question. That's why I asked.
There's individual accounts for every alder person. So there is tracking for how many each person uses. Because I'm trying to look back now, but personnel previously allocated a certain dollar amount, for every office. And
Right.
and so the use at multi-graph is counted against that. I'm trying to find the emails we sent out now.
So I guess I'm asking this, this the question I'm asking, because I hear what Shane said about the mailing of the Good Neighbor guides. And so I have mailed out the Good Neighbor guides. And then I was coming back and they said, you can't do it anymore. You didn't mailed out your Good Neighbor guides. So that's why I'm confused. That's why I was asking, Madam President, was it a budgeted amount for multi-graph for, mailings?
Yes.
And so I know you get the 200 stamps. So what I'm hearing is it's a budget amount for the multi-graph plus the 200 stamps. Is that's what I'm hearing?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. I never got the budget for the multi-graph. That's what I was confused about, because they kept saying, Alderwoman, you used all you had for the multi-graph, because I just told them take all my Good Neighbor guys and send it out to my constituents. And then when I came back and I said, well, I didn't have enough, they said, you can't go through multi-graph anymore. So that's why I was confused.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the dollar amount that we set before. Sorry, I don't have that.
I'm happy to provide some clarification, but Alderman Aldridge also has his hand up if he'd like to speak.
Okay. Alderman Aldridge.
No, I was I think Alderman Cone covered it. I mean, I do remember in personnel, we talked about having, outside of the individual stamps, that each alder has an account for multi-graph to get stuff printed. I know at one point I almost used multi-graph to get something printed, and I've talked with Tracy where then with that same account, I think they could use the pre-sort to send it out. But I guess I'm curious because I heard that, alders didn't use that account, and I know the alderman said maybe it rose over. I know typically Paul Payne looks at it, and if it's not being used, try to cut the fat. So do we know how much was not utilized? And I do remember the emails being sent out from personnel, but how much was not utilized from the board in that account?
That I don't know that I have. Jay may have that, but I did find the number here. So this is the from the email that we sent out to the board previously. First one was sent December 7th, 2023. That let's see, each alder person has $7,600 for fiscal year 24 to send out meter mail. And each alder person has $1,300 for fiscal year 24 to print items outside of what the full Board of Aldermen budget covers. So that's for the previous fiscal year, that is what we had allocated to each of those line items for per alder person.
So I guess my question.
Alderman, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Jay, do you have an update on how much was
Yes.
used from that?
Yeah, so in the previous budget years, the Personnel Committee had decided to budget $114,000 for this program. That money was basically not utilized. Our office utilized between 10 and 11,000 in those previous years. Going into this new FY budget, when you receive your budget books, you will see that Paul decreased that by 75,000 because alders were not utilizing the program.
So I guess, is that fair? If did anybody reach out to say Alderwoman Keys and said you did not utilize your, you know what I'm saying? Nobody said anything that it wasn't utilized. So now you just cutting it off. And from what I'm hearing, people didn't even know you could utilize it.
Well, I would say to that, Alderwoman Boyd, there was several communications from our office and from Tracy as well, notifying alders of the process and the program.
Unfortunately, for some
I
reason, I
didn't
can't
get it.
raise my hand to respond.
I didn't get it.
Alderwoman Keys, I'll call on you after Jay
Thank you.
is finished. Jay,
Yeah,
you cut out
You cut out.
for,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
yes.
I was saying that there were several communications from our office and from Tracy as well to alders about the process and notifying you of how much money you had. If you did not receive that, I will double check our records, but I know for sure we sent out multiple communications about it.
Alderwoman Keys.
Thank you, Madam President. So when I had my good neighbor guides printed, they were delivered, and I thought that I had enough to at least cover the people who had voted in the last election. I found that I had 700 and some odd pieces. I contacted Tracy. I said, hey, I need more. So eventually I got more, but still never the to the extent that I would have needed. I used my postage stamps that I had kind of banked in order to send that out. So now that's depleted. So in terms of the printing of the Good Neighbor Guide this next cycle, I want to find out how many can I get printed, because they just gave me some. They didn't tell me this is what you're going to receive, and it was woefully deficient in the number that was actually needed, and I wasn't aware if I was able to order any more beyond what I had gotten.
We are happy to look into that and work with you in Multigraph to kind of figure out kind of where each alderperson is in terms of what they've had printed and what they still can get printed.
So additionally, now I use my stamps. And like I said, I've depleted what I've had. And so when I am sending out different communications on a regular basis to people in my ward, 200 stamps doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of what is needed. Our wards are really almost triple. But I don't know why our postage stamps didn't come along at the same rate.
Yeah, so we don't provide postage stamps anymore. The postage goes through Multigraph. And so every alderperson for this last fiscal year had $7,600 to send out metered mail through Multigraph. It's a discounted rate. So it's cheaper to send through Multigraph than it is to put individual stamps on every piece of mail. And so you don't need your stamps to do that. Those bulk mailings can be sent via Multigraph, and you have a budget there to pay for those.
Okay, so for instance, I had a situation where an entertainment group, Heatwave, came to St. Louis. They wanted additional commemorative copies, sent to each member of the band. I shouldered that expense out of my own pocket to do that for them because I had to have a special type of envelope and packaging in order to send this various places throughout the United States. So in an instance like that, because when we do have people to come in and they do want commemorative copies, is that something we're going to take to Multigraph? Can we just, get something to take it to the post office? How's this going to work?
So that is something that you could ask Multigraph to print, or you could pay for it out of your aldermanic expense account. I don't know if you do the itemized or the bulk for that, but expenses like that can be paid for, can count toward your expense account.
Right. So I don't use the expense account in that way. So, well, okay, then thank you. I have the answers I needed. Thank you.
Okay. And if you need help with Multigraph, just let us know. We're happy to help.
Oh, last question. So whatever I didn't use, is that still there?
That's what I was going
And
to
is that rolled over so that and added to what we will currently have?
Unfortunately, not at this time, because Director Payne kind of had us pull back some things that had not been used, because we're anticipating a very tight budget this next season. But as you know, we're just starting budget season. So if those are things that we want to, collectively fight for as a board, as the budget gets to us, I think we can definitely have that conversation.
Thank you.
Could I ask one more question? Because so now I'm hearing we don't get the 200 stamps, right?
Correct.
Okay.
It's through
But we'll have the multi-graph. So
Correct.
I'm kind of like Alderwoman Key. So for 2 years, I'm assuming 2 years, that we didn't use the budget for multigraph. I was going through the emails to try to see, because I never saw anybody saying, hey, you didn't use this for your printing. So that's why I'm just trying to figure out. So now Paul is saying, oh, we're going to cut this back because they're not using it. So I just wonder how many other people don't know that they can use it. You know what I'm saying? It's not making sense. I'm not gonna say it's not fair, but I just feel it's not making sense.
And I think we can definitely have that conversation through the budget, as we get the budget to the board and go back to Director Payne and kind of, if we need to make a plea that, it was new transitioning over to this system from having physical stamps to the multi-graph system, and older people would like another chance at using their mail budgets before being clawed back, and see what he's able to work with us on that. So I think this is the time to be having those conversations, given that budget will be to us very shortly. Alderman Cohn, did you? Sorry, pop-ups.
Not to belabor the stamp conversation, but we know it's going to happen every session at the beginning of session. So I guess my thoughts on this is, if we're going to use multi-graph exclusively for postage, which I'm fine with, my concern is that we either need to then be able to fund every year a ward-wide mailer, because if we're going to get in this situation where we only get a certain allotment of stamps every year, and then oftentimes some of us try to accumulate those so that we can do larger mailers, if we get into a situation where the budget division is just going to zero out those accounts because they can, that does a huge disservice to anyone that's trying to build up those funds so that they can communicate with their constituents. So we either need to make him aware that he's not allowed to touch those funds, period, or we need to do a budget that's large enough to do ward-wide mailers every single year, so that older people have the opportunity to do that.
Agreed. And when we set, when we set those dollar amounts for postage and for printing, if you recall, Alderman Cohn, we did that so that alders could send a ward-wide mailing every year. So I think at this point in time, we need to go back to the budget director and have a conversation about that, moving forward.
I mean, having just gotten freshly off of a campaign where I've done several mailers for the entire ward, the amounts that we put out there are nowhere near what we would need to do for a ward-wide mailer. And I guess that also depends on the type of mailer. I did take advantage of the budget for Good Neighbor Guides the past 2 sessions. But I had conversations around using multigraph for mailing those, and I frankly didn't get very far with those conversations. And so in terms of them having to be stickered, they have to be, stickered, labeled, in a particular manner. There's, I think we need to have either multigraph come before us or have a conversation around that. But certainly, I think it's worthy of fighting for to make sure that we're being, all of us are able to communicate with our constituents.
I agree with that. I just want to make sure it's clear that what we had allocated previously was $9,200 per alderperson for postage and mailing, which I think should definitely cover a mailing to the ward.
Then why wasn't I able to print more Good Neighbor Guides? I think I got capped out at maybe 700 good neighbor
Yep,
guides.
that was me. Mhm.
We
So
will, we'll have
700
to
Good
follow.
Neighbor Guides should not cost $9,200. So, and
Yeah,
I literally was told that I couldn't print any more than that. That's not even enough to mail to 1% of the ward.
Mhm.
So,
So that may be a follow-up conversation with Multigraph as to why that was capped at that, unless Director Gracia has a
So
follow-up.
the emails that we communicated with alderpersons and staff was that the internal services line item is something that's internal to the Board of Aldermen. So there was a process by which alderpersons were supposed to work with Tracy. Our financial analyst created a spreadsheet to track funds because Multigraph has a separate budget that's internal to their department that allows for alder people to create and print the Good Neighbor Guides. It's 2 separate accounts, one internal to Multigraph, one internal to the Board of Aldermen.
So in theory, if an alderperson maxed out with the number that Multigraph would print out of their budget, they should then be able to print more using the board budget.
That's correct.
Okay.
Does
Thank you.
Multigraph know that, or does Tracy know that? Because I mean, essentially, Tracy was not, she's not here to talk to it, so I don't want to, necessarily say that. I mean, she's the one that was policing, the amounts and, what we were able to do. I mean, it would have been helpful if she would have said, well, that's the limit on this budget, and we can now utilize another budget.
I apologize. I don't have an answer to that, but definitely always feel free to reach out to our office if you're running into trouble. I will try to get some additional information to report back to the committee. And again, I don't have the information, some of the information I need to be able to communicate with you because I was not expecting to be having this conversation today.
That's fair.
And
Alderwoman Keys.
so recently I went to my own print house and had Good Neighbor Guides printed. And I was able to get enough to do a household mailing to frequent voters. And it was nowhere near what the amount that you all are saying that we had. And so if that's what Multigraph is charging, and I did not mail them through Multigraph, then we need to take a serious look at what Multigraph is charging and find out if there are other vendors who can do this thing cheaper. Because this is just a ridiculous amount of money for a Good Neighbor Guide, and still I didn't have all that I needed.
So I think what Director Gracia just clarified for us is Multigraph out of their budget is allowing for 700 to be printed per alder person. If alder people want more than that 700, they would have to use their print and mail budget that we have here at the board, and that needs to go through Tracy. And so that was the
Right, well, I
additional
did that, but
1300.
still, you know, the math ain't adding up. That's what I'm saying to you.
Yeah, I think that there was some, I don't know, Tracy's not here, so I think we'll have to, follow up with her, kind of on that process, but there, what was brought to us is that those mail budgets weren't being utilized, but it sounds like the communications that were happening with Multigraph was not taking into account the board budget for those line items. So we will work on getting that solidified, and then we'll follow up with Tracy after this meeting and get something out to the alder folks about it.
Thank you.
All right, with that, let's move on to our next discussion item, which is the committee will discuss choosing chairs for committees for the 2025-2026 Board of Aldermen session. I just want to first thank everybody for all of the nominations that they sent in. For everybody who's on here today, we did put in the drive kind of a list of all of the nominations that came forth, and all of that. Director Ingracia, do you have your hand raised still?
I do. Thank you, Madam President. I wasn't sure if you still wanted to have me go first to go over the renovation project, since I have a meeting, and then go back to the.
Yeah, sorry, I had that later on the agenda, but we will, yes. Sorry about that. We will go back and so that you can get to your meeting. And if you would like to, we'll go to discussion item number 4, if you would like to discuss the renovations.
Great, thanks so much. Are you all able to see the screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So at the last personnel committee, the committee members approved looking into what it would cost. We know we need new flooring in all of our office spaces and new office furniture. I think it's been since like the mid 1980s that we've had new furniture or flooring in here. And so if we move forward with all of the work that needs to be done in 230, 232, and 234, we would be at likely around $185,000. And so what we have left over for this fiscal year, which we need to spend pretty quickly, is around $140,000. So the proposal before you is a spreadsheet of 2 bids, one which we received from Warehouse of Fixtures, that would allow for all of the office spaces in 230 to receive new office furniture, desks, chairs, cabinets, and then allow for flooring. There's 2 options at the bottom of the spreadsheet. One is carpet tiles throughout the office space. The other is putting laminate, which is sort of like a fake wood looking flooring, and that would be in the main areas, and then carpeting in the offices. So if we move forward with these projects, we would spend around $120,000, and which would give us about a $20,000 contingency. One of the things we're not aware of is whether or not we are going to encounter any issues with remediation, such as asbestos, when we pull up the flooring. That was an issue when we redid chambers. And so just wanted to take questions from the committee and hopefully come up with a decision today on what we would like to fund with the remainder of fiscal year 2025 funds, because we need to have those moving pretty quickly before the cutoff from the comptroller's office.
Are there any questions for members of the committee? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I stated, I guess I just see you present, I guess maybe just green is, oh, okay. I think I stated last go around, my concern is, while I support that we need to probably potentially redo the carpet or have hardwood floors. So, if we spill something, it's easier to clean up. But my concern is just the timing of potentially doing the changing of not only the changing of the carpet, bringing in new desks. My second kind of question to that is like, what's going to be the size of the desk? I think we said they'll be the same as the LAs that they have in the LA suite. And I know those desks are quite long. So it's going to take a lot of work to, if we were to do the whole 230, which is this whole wing, which is the aldermatic wing over here, the executive secretaries, the clerks, all the way up to the chamber, that's going to be a lot of, trying to move offices and also move staff to a workplace where they still can work. And my fear is once we do pull up the carpet, as I think I pulled up the carpet in the president office, is that we figured out that there was asbestos. And if that's the case, this whole wing will be shut down for quite a while. So I'm almost in the mindset of, I think we definitely need new desks for our executive secretaries and maybe staff, but I wouldn't be opposed to just like doing a deep shampoo of the carpet, because I feel like if we pull up that carpet, there will be asbestos, as there was pulled up carpet in the office space that you're now in, Deputy Chief Ingracia. So I'm just nervous of the timing to do all of these projects.
I think those are great points. One of the things we've talked about with the flooring vendor and warehouse of fixtures is that we would request that it be done during summer break. If we do encounter asbestos, which to your point, I think is likely, the remediation may take a couple of extra weeks after the board returns, but I think not doing all of the work at once allows for people to not just work from home, but take up other space that's available, office space. For people who want to work from here, we have room 234, which is typically only inhabited by just a couple of people per day. We have plenty of room for people to work from there. I understand the hesitation, but I guess if we're already going to be taking out old furniture and moving in new furniture, the thought was that it just makes sense to do the flooring at the same time.
Okay, and you think with taking out the old furniture, that I guess the executive secretaries could work in the other space? Have there been conversations with IT because of like hooking up computers and making sure that all their belongings, because that's going to be a lot of moving, all their belongings, all the stuff in the cabinets and their desk is going to be housed in that one space, but will we have enough, not only space for them, but to be able to make sure that they have the equipment to do their day-to-day operations, answering phones and sending out emails from a computer?
Sure, I think the idea would be that for most people, it would be working from home, and if you needed to come into the office, you could. We were able to do that successfully for a couple of years during the pandemic, so I think there might be some, challenges, but overall, I think everybody will be able to do the work they need to do.
Alderman Cone.
Was the alderman from the 14th finished?
You can go ahead, Alderman Cone. I'll wait.
Your hand was still up, my friend, so wasn't sure.
It's down now. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I feel like I would be supportive of the approach to take care of it all at once. I mean, in terms of people packing up offices and desks and stuff, they're gonna have to do that anyway if we're changing out desks. So, if you're getting a new desk, you have to clean out and store whatever's in there anyway. So we might as well take care of the flooring at the same time. But I am curious if that contingency amount that you have in there, Director Ingracia, based off of the experience that we had renovating 232, 234, we didn't change out the carpet and 234, but 232 and the chamber, is that contingency sufficient to cover the cost if they do run into any of those issues with asbestos?
remediation in chambers was $5,000. If that's,
So that should be more than enough, I would think, then.
I believe so.
Okay. I would be fine with that approach. I share the concerns with, my colleague from the 14th. But I think we brought this up before we came into the new session, when we charged you with reaching out and finding these proposals, that this should be done over the summer recess, which is the longest recess that we have, to kind of give some time to accommodate those schedules. And the workflow of the executive secretaries, is summer is generally a time, because we're not having committee hearings and things of that nature, where they have a little bit more time to catch up on things. So I would be supportive of taking care of all of this at the same time.
Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you. Just a few more questions on the debt. So again, do we know the length of the desks? So I'm assuming they're going to be the same as in the LA suite, correct?
No, if you can see on the description, they're different lengths and widths of desks. Warehouse of Fixtures walked through with Tracy and I and measured all of the office spaces to make sure that the desks would fit for the
And I
size
know,
office that the person has.
okay, and I know a lot of like, some of our LAs don't have an office, and they use a desk and they use the back file cabinet for additional space. Will these desks have like drawers for them to put additional items that they already currently put their items in, or are these like I think the one over there that don't have drawers, it's just a stand up or stand down?
It's a desk. It will have one of the pen holder drawers underneath it, and then a standalone cabinet. I don't know. I can't think of anyone on your side right now who has the old desk, the metal desk like mine, or anyone in our policy suite has, where the metal drawers are attached on the side. It would be a standalone cabinet.
Okay.
There any further discussion related to this item? If not, then I would entertain a motion to approve up to, Director Ingrassia, can you scroll down so I can see the full?
I would, if you could approve up to
Up to 141. Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve up to $141,000 to upgrade the flooring and desks and fixtures in room 230
And
Quick
234.
and 234, whatever it is. Yeah.
Quick question. 234, is that where's 234?
That's the offices that the senior offices outside of the LA cave, but we also never redid the carpet and the legislative assistant area either.
Okay, so we potentially will be doing both sides that may have asbestos, I'm assuming, in both sides. It would be good to know maybe a time frame, because like I think what Alderman Cone brought up, if there is a asbestos remediation, on both sides of the wing of the board, like the board will basically be, shut down, and maybe I guess we'll be back in the Kennedy room, depending on if it's over there by the clerk, they would have to close off that chamber side. So we'll most likely be back in the Kennedy room. It's just, I think my concern is time. I understand we'll do summer break. And then the second one, have we decided if we're going to do the carpet or the hardwood?
So first answer is this is just for room 230. So we would not be doing the work in 230 and 234, or we're not doing the work in 232 or 234 at this time. It's something that the personnel committee can discuss for possibly fiscal year funds in the future. This is just for what we have in 2025, and the amount we have fits in nicely with everything that needs to be done in 230. And I apologize. What was your second question?
I think I went out. I'm sorry. Yeah. Have we decided if we're going to do the carpet or if we're going to do the hardwood?
I think it would be good for at least the personnel committee to maybe take a look at the city councilor's office. Just did laminate floors and common spaces and carpet tiles in the offices. So I would like for you to maybe take a look at that and decide what your preference is, because it looks nice, but it's not I mean, if you're a hardwood fan, you can tell that it's not, you know, it's luxury vinyl. It's not actual hardwood. But the estimate that I gave included the most expensive, which would be around $30,000 for carpeting and laminate versus $22,500 for all carpet tiles.
I brought this up at the last meeting. My only concern with laminate is that noise bounces off of it. And so you're in a pretty confined space over there with many people. And so, especially since everyone is on the phones a lot over there as well. And there might be a couple loud talkers like that could be problematic for people trying to talk on the phone or concentrate even.
Yeah, I'm happy to ask the city councilor's office if they've been experiencing any similar issues, and I can ask the manufacturer or the vendor for the flooring about that.
Yeah, I'd be curious about that, Director Ingracia. Also, the city councilor's office is slightly different because they're a little more spaced out than we are, and that particularly in room 30. So I would be interested in that because I wouldn't want to create any further, issues. But it is cleaner. Obviously, it's easier to clean than carpets, but the whole purpose of carpet tiles is that if it does get stained or, has problems, hazardous, safety issues, things of that nature, then you can just take that particular tile up and replace it as we did in the LA cave, with the new construction that happened over there. But just my thought.
I'll get that information to you at the next committee hearing.
Okay. So with that, I will entertain a motion to approve up to 141,000 to update room 230.
So moved. And 234.
No, just 230.
She just said that, just 230.
But do we need that entire amount for just 230 though?
Correct.
I thought
And
that.
then, yes,
Okay.
and then we'll be coming back to personnel. We're doing a phased approach to get these upgrades in.
Sorry, I thought the 141 was for both 230 and 234. Okay, all right. I move that we approve up to 141,000 for updates to carpet and furnishings for room 230.
There a second?
I heard the alderwoman from the 10th sec. I think her sound's a little low, but
Okay, I can't hear the alderwoman from the 10th. So it's been moved. I can see her mouth. I just can't hear anything. So it's been moved by the alderman from the 3rd, seconded by the alderwoman from the 10th. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Cone,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. I can't hear you. Thank you. Alderman Aldridge.
present.
President Green,
Aye.
3 aye votes and 1 voted present.
Great. By your vote, you sustain the motion. I have now been told we have received Alderwoman Tyus's hiring. Do we want to take that up now, or do we want to put that at the end?
I'm
When you
fine.
say I was gonna say when you say received,
We have received communication from Alderwoman Tyus for who the preference for hiring. Do we want to go back into closed session, or what do we want to do committee chairs and then go back into closed session?
if we do go into closed session, I just would probably vote present because I think I just want to make sure if we pick somebody, it's exactly, and not saying the communication received is not true, but I don't want to be in no position where we pick somebody and the alderwoman is not happy that we moved on something without her because, yeah.
It would still need to be voted on by the full board though, Alderman. And I hear
Okay,
you.
well, I'll just vote present again. I don't want to pick nobody that I'm not sure. I haven't received any communications, and there's a lot of applications in the drive, so I don't want to make any decisions and it don't be right. But however the committee going to proceed.
Sharita,
I do have a text message and I spoke with her, so I do have it in writing of her selection, so.
If you want to maybe recess or stand at ease and we can look that up.
But she did ask if someone could make the motion.
okay, the question is, do you want
We should
to
go into
take up?
close, yeah.
Do you want to go into closed session now, or do you want to take up the last thing on our agenda, which is committee chairs, and then go into closed session?
I'm fine going into closed session.
Okay, then I will,
I'll defer to the rest of the committee though.
then I would entertain a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Missouri State Statute 610.0213 and 610.022 in order to discuss the hiring of employees of the Board of Aldermen.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Cone,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, I'm sorry, Alderwoman, I can't hear you. Alderman Aldridge,
Present.
President Green,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Two aye votes and one voted present.
Right, with that, STLTV, could you put us back into closed session, please? With that, we will move to our final item on today's agenda, which is the selection of committee chairs for the 2025-2026 Board of Aldermen session. First, want to thank everybody for sending in their nominations. We had quite a few. I think the way I want to go about this is to first take maybe the easy ones, the ones that maybe only had one person who was nominated as that committee chair or for committee chair. And so let's start with Health and Human Development, where it looks like Alderwoman Boyd was the only member of the Board of Aldermen to receive a nomination for chair of that committee. Alderwoman from the 10th.
Thank you, Madam President. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just think since we are doing this publicly and it's being shared in live and airstream, that we should probably give live stream, rather we should probably give a little more context into the nomination process and how we got to where we are today before we start moving forward.
Great. Yeah, happy to do that. So for anybody who is just tuning in, after the board meeting on Monday, email was sent out to all members of the Board of Aldermen from the Leadership Committee, asking them to nominate either themselves or another alderperson for committee chairmanships. Those emails had to be into leadership, I think by 1:45 p.m. yesterday. And all those nominations have been assembled into a document so we could see who all was nominated for each committee, how many nominations each person got for that committee. Some alder people wrote, some nice paragraphs about why they were nominating certain folks for certain chairmanships. And so those have all been compiled into a document that's in the drive at the moment. And then what we will do today is go through those nominations, and as leadership, will vote on those chairmanships. So Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, is there anything else you would like to add to that?
No, that was perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Alderman Aldridge.
Thank you. And just to add on to that, with that nominations, I want to be clear that all those nominations are in the drive. So for alders who are online, and I know we'll probably talk about that, but every alder should have received the nominations, who nominated them, and how many nominations did they get for that as well.
Great. So with that, I think I would like to go back to the Health and Human Development Committee. There was only one alderperson who was nominated to chair that committee. That was Alderwoman Boyd. And so I will take discussion or a motion on that chairmanship.
I'd like to make a motion that we make Alderwoman Boyd the chair of Health and Human Development.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Alderman Cone, discussion?
Has anyone actually talked? I was one of the folks that nominated Alderwoman Boyd for that, but I haven't had a conversation with her in terms of her desire to chair that committee. Has anyone reached out to her to make sure that she is willing and wanting to do that? I noticed she.
Alderwoman Boyd is here. Alderwoman Boyd, do you accept that nomination?
It was 5 people, Shane, that reached out to me.
Okay,
So-
wonderful.
Yeah,
You
accepted.
accepted. Okay.
Yeah, it was 5.
We figured.
Yeah,
Awesome. Just making sure. Thank you, Alderwoman.
you're welcome.
Alderman from the 14th.
Yeah, just on discussion, I'll say I do think this is a good pick for the committee. I know the Alderwoman from the 13th have chaired this committee for the last 2 years, and I know I sent the email out saying if this was one that she wanted to be on, because I know she has done it very well the last 2 years. So I think this would be a really good pick to move the board forward for this committee.
But with that, it had been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Cone,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green,
Aye.
4 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion. Congratulations, Alderwoman Boyd. All right, next, I think I would like to go to Public Safety Committee. We had 2 nominations for Public Safety Committee. We had Alderman Ryan and Alderman Oldenburg. I will open it up for discussion and or a motion on those nominations.
Yeah, so I was one of the folks that nominated Alderman Narayan. I believe he's done a good job as chair. I'm a little concerned that we're using the nominations as a voting process instead of what it means to just have someone nominate you. So I was not familiar with Alderman Oldenburg's intention. I don't know if he's still on the line. But I do think it's worth having a discussion around, since there are only 2 people nominated for this committee. I don't know if Alderman Narayan's on as well, but just have them speak to their desire, qualifications, interest, etc.
I mean, I'm happy to do that. We did not tell other people in advance that was something that they could do, and I to make sure that they would all be here. I'm happy to allow the older people that are here to speak. I also just want to be cognizant that not all older people who are up for chairmanships are here, because I don't think it was told to them that they could come and plead their case if they wanted to. Alderman from the 14th.
I actually nominated Alderman Narayan and Alderman Odenberg. I've served with Alderman, actually both alders on the committee, being the vice chair of public safety. I think Alderman Narayan has just demonstrated like really good leadership. It's a interesting committee to balance. A lot that has went through the committee has been focused on public safety with policing, but we've addressed things like the CJC and which in the jail, which can bring a lot of emotions out of the community. And sometimes we had to move things around to make sure that we accommodated the community, and also serve with Alderman Ryan or Odenberg, who's been good on the committee. I did notice that someone else had sent out an email for Alderman Odenberg for several committees, so I reached out and asked him if he was interested in the committees and wanted me to do the same. So we didn't get into the details of various committees he was interested in, but I did nominate him for that also because I seen that others had said he was interested, so I asked him and he told me do so, so I did so.
With that, I do see that Alderman Oldenburg is here, and we could give you 3 minutes to speak if you would like to say anything.
Sure. Thank you, Madam President. I don't necessarily need to plead my case here, and your point's well taken, Madam President, on not necessarily inviting folks to do that here. But I thought it important really just to press upon the leadership that Alderwoman Boyd and I came in the class of 2017. We're currently the third senior ranking alder people. I have a background and an expertise that I think lends itself to really three main areas of focus that I think I'd be adequate to be the chair of, and that would be around interests of HUD's public safety or potentially the budget committee. So that's where I sort of let folks know my interest levels lie. And I do think it could just be important to not ensure, but to give good notice that the top 3 or 4 alder folks of seniority maybe should be considered for committees, chairmanships. I have nothing against Alderman Narayan. I think he ran the Public Safety Committee well. I know that he does want the Public Safety Committee, and probably his only committee he wanted. That's it, where he said he had interest. So I'll leave that bit of information with you as well.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Any further discussion from the committee? If not, I would, and Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you so much, President Green. I think this is a big responsibility on leadership to make the decisions about committee chairmanships and who does what. And, it's going through it the way that you all are with picking each committee one by one. It's interesting because then the kind of pool will get smaller and smaller as the committees go down the list. So, I nominated Alderman Oldenburg for a few different committees. And so I know we're talking about public safety right now, but I just want to make sure that people are being fairly considered for every committee. And it's not necessarily just, going through the list and checking them off so that people are not being considered for other committees they might be interested in. But, I'm going to obviously let you all run the meeting and decide how you want to do things and what works for you. I just wanted to make that point, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Alderman from the 14th.
I want to know if it's okay to ask the alderman from the second a question.
Sure. Alderman from the second, would you yield to a question from the alderman from the 14th?
Sure.
Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. I think like the alderman from the first said, I know there's at least maybe 3 or 4 committees that you're nominated for, Alderman. Let's say public safety, we'll get to potentially HUD's budget and transportation commerce. I know, those committee have a lot of time requirements. Do you feel that if chair of those committees that you would be able to make time for those committees, especially budget, like, they're going to be meeting very regularly, HUD's, sometimes meetings change because it's a heavy committee with development. I'm not too much sure about transportation and commerce, but I know in public safety also is very time constraint depending on what's happening in the public. But maybe just want to know if you could respond, like, would you have the capacity to chair these big major committees?
Well, I think the chairmanship's an awesome responsibility, and the answer is yes. I believe I would have demonstrated commitment to the Board of Aldermen, to my colleagues, but also to my constituents that I can certainly make time for them. I've been reelected 3 times in this position, so I don't think anyone's sort of questioning my level of commitment, and would certainly make the time and do understand the awesome responsibility that's underscored. So absolutely could make time.
Thank you, Alderman.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion?
Madam President,
Yes.
not necessarily pertinent to public safety directly, but to the Alderman of the First Ward's point, voting on each committee separately does start to narrow the pool down in terms of where members might be able to find a chairmanship. Do we want to have discussion around each of the committees first before taking up votes on any of them, just in case we have a desire to put someone somewhere that might need to shift some of the folks around?
I don't think I'm quite understanding what you're saying. So
instead of taking up each individual committee for a vote right now, have a discussion of this slate of committees as a whole first, and then get a sense of where people are with each of the committees before taking them up for a vote. I know we've already voted on Health and Human Development, but before
there was only one nominee there, so only one person who was eligible.
Right. So, but before we start going down the rabbit hole and narrowing the number of committees that people would be eligible for a chairmanship role, because we're voting on them as we go through them, instead, since the rest of the committees now have multiple nominees, having a discussion about each of the nominees, where people are, thoughts on those, so that we can, then make a kind of collaborative group decision on the slate of committee chairs.
If the committee would like to proceed that way, I'm fine proceeding that way. Alderman from the 10th, Alderman from the 14th are you good with that?
I'm fine. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I'm fine. I'm trying to work with my computer for this access, but can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
I'm fine with that. This is new for all of us, right? So we're all trying to navigate this process and doing it this way. So I'm fine with that.
Alderman from the 14th.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just trying to get an understanding. So if we end up just talking about who's all nominated, we still won't be making like the decisions. Or Alderman from the 3rd, are you wanting to talk about each category and who is all nominated just to have a conversation about it and then come back to vote for each one? How are you envisioning, after we talk about it, figure out who goes where outside of the nominations?
Yeah, I think we should probably start from the top and go down, whether that's the perceived significance of the committee or what have you, or the number of nominees on each committee. HUDs, I think, has the most nominees on it. I'm just going through the spreadsheet here real quick. There's 5 nominees for HUDs, 4 for TNC, 4 for budget, 4 for legislation and rules. So just kind of talking through each of those as and voting on them after we have the conversation about each of them.
I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to it. So do we, I guess we already on public safety, and I think we talked about it. I do see the Alderman from
But
the 4th is here.
there's there's no motion on the table for it. So if we want to open up and have a greater discussion about kind of committee chairmanships in general, first, I think I am happy to do that.
I am. Again, I know that we gave time to the alderman of the second to talk about public safety, since that's what we just talked about. And I see Alderman Orion, who is also nominated, is here, maybe to talk about his interests or anything before we maybe go off of it and come
Get
back.
into that. Okay, Alderman from the fourth, is there anything you would like to say about your request to chair public safety?
Sure. I'm just jumping on now, so I'm kind of midstream here. But I think I certainly have an interest in continuing to chair public safety. I think over the last 2 years, I've shown that I'm willing to have hearings on anything that either members of the board or members of the community are concerned about, whether or not I necessarily agree with those individuals. I've developed and maintained a great relationship with the chief of police, the former director of public safety, and the chief of the fire department. We've had, essentially weekly meetings, both with public safety and then me with the chief of police and the previous administration. I have a background in this as well, and I would like to continue doing it, and certainly happy to address any questions or concerns that anyone may have.
Thank you, Alderman. So with that, we can open it up to larger discussion amongst the committee about all committees. I think I would like to just say a few words, as we're looking at this through a big picture lens. I do think it's very important that as we're looking at this, we are taking into account assigning folks to committees in a way that represents both the racial and demographic or geographical diversity of our city, and hope that when we're kind of making these decisions that we are doing so in a way to make sure that they're that we have both north side and south side representatives, especially given that there have been a lot. Just looking at the nominations, there are a lot more folks that have been nominated from the south side than from the north side, and I want to be just cognizant of that in our deliberations to make sure that there is an equitable distribution of committee chairmanships. So that's kind of what I'm looking for through this process, as well as a commitment to that committee, and or having showed the willingness to put together kind of a legislative agenda for that committee and work through those things. So that's kind of my high level view that I'm taking to this process, but I will open it up to the rest of the members of the committee.
I was just gonna throw out there, since we're going committee by committee, if maybe we wanted to start with public infrastructure, because I do see that Alderwoman Ann is also on, if we want to go to that one next.
Well, I thought we were talking about all of the committees now.
So do we just want to? Okay, we're not making nominations, but we're just going to talk about them. So should each committee member just, again, that's why I was curious how Alderman Shane envisioned doing this.
I mean, there's 13 eligible members of the Board of Aldermen for committees. We have 7 committees out of the 13 eligible people for committees. 9 of them have been nominated for a committee. So we have 7 committees and 9 individuals nominated to chair committees. Out of the people who have been nominated, out of the 9 that have been nominated, 4 of them have been nominated for only one committee. So that would be Narayan, Velasquez, Boyd, and Aldridge. Out of those 4 nominated for only one committee, 2 of them are kind of more junior alder persons.
We are going to be in the chamber because they.
Sorry, I don't know who that was. Schweitzer, Oldenburg, both had nominations for 5 committees. Myself, I had nominations for 4 committees. And then otherwise, Browning had nominations for 2 committees. So, and I'm including in that the special committee on red tape, which is not a standing committee. So Schweitzer otherwise would have had 4 nominations for standing committees, and Oldenburg would have had 5 nominations for various committee chairmanship roles. And so my concern is that he is in the top 4 in terms of seniority at the Board of Aldermen. He's got the most nominations of any alder person. If we're using nominations as a bellwether for whether or not people get a chair role, which I don't think that we should do, because otherwise we should just change our rules to allow for a straight vote from the members on who's chairing committees, similar to what we do with the leadership. I think we're being entrusted as leadership to have these conversations openly and frankly with each other about these committee chairmanship roles. And so I'm talking about the various data points here. So I do think that it's a point well taken in terms of wanting to make sure that we have the various parts of the city represented in various chair roles. But I know, at least as of yesterday, I was having conversations with 2 other members of the leadership team around if I were to be chair of Transportation and Commerce, would I work with another colleague and allow them the opportunity to be on planning? I think that if we go down that path, then, which of course would require that individual to be on the TNC committee, which of course is not the discretion of leadership, it's the discretion of the president's office. So if we're going to do that, then, we need to have those conversations around other, members of this body as well. And, certainly my thought is that, if Alderman Oldenburg doesn't end up as a committee chair, then he needs to at least be a vice chair of a committee. And that we should be having those conversations with the potential chairs of those committees to see if that's a possibility. But I think, just on the value of the data alone, I think it's worth having the discussion around each of the respective chair roles. So my thought, I mean, I don't know if Alderman, if you're kind of tossing that for me to kind of frame the conversation in terms of how we move the discussion forward with respect to the various chairs and committees, I'm happy to do that if that's what you're asking.
No, I think you just.
Alderwoman from the
Oh, go ahead.
10th.
I'm gonna let the other one go.
And can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to do a point of clarification from Alderman Cohn's comments that I was only nominated for one committee. And I also want to not take away the value in people that wholeheartedly reached out to their colleagues and talked to them about what committees they wanted to serve in their interests, and weighed with them even the commitment and the level of commitment that it would take for these committees. And since we're doing this publicly, I want to make sure that our constituencies understand that even some of these chairs, there's not just the chair of that committee, there are additional chairs, which was aforementioned as well. So I want to make sure that our colleagues feel like their votes, their nominations did matter, right? And we were able to self-nominate and nominate others. And again, some people reached out to their colleagues to no avail, to no answer, but they still tried. And having that, taking that time, I think makes the difference in how you will be able to work as a chair and work together to be able to legislate down here at the board. So I know that it sounds like there might be some challenge, right, around the weight of these nominations, but really the work and even some that put in comments as well, I think that we need to make sure that they know that we, one, first listened, right, and took into account what it was, and that we are going to work wholeheartedly on this space and on this platform now to move these chairmanships forward. So again, those are just a couple of things I wanted to clarify. Again, for myself, I was only nominated for one committee. Thank you.
And sorry, Alderwoman, I misspoke. You were actually nominated for 2 chairmanships. If I said one, my apologies. You were nominated for both Public Employees and Budget and for HUDs for chair.
I didn't see that on my,
Alderman Cone nominated you. He was
you
the
have
only one
to,
who
don't get the
nominated you.
nominator and the nominee. Do you see the difference between the, because I don't see.
No, so Alderman Cone nominated you for also budget. I'm not sure if that's what y'all talked, but he nominated you for that.
Okay, so just for clarity for people listening, I did not have a specific conversation with Alderman Cone about that, right? And so what my conversation probably conveyed was that I'm a team player and I'll be a chair wherever I need to be a chair, or a committee member wherever I need to be a committee member. So if someone nominated me for something outside of that, outside of the only committee that I showed interest in specifically, which was HUDs, then I appreciate that, right? We know the value in that. But I didn't have any conversation about that, and my spreadsheet didn't reflect that. So thank you for the nomination, Alderman Cone.
I did also nominate you for HUDs, Alderwoman, so it wasn't. But and I think, you know, that goes to, you know, the point that was made earlier. You know, these are nominations, they're not votes. And if we were going to use them as such, then we should have communicated it to the body, because I think people would have probably acted accordingly and whipping votes for their respective committee chairmanships. But that was not the expectation that was thrown out with people. And so some people took it upon themselves to whip votes, and some people you know, were, you know, either gracious or team player, or, you know, whatever kind of term you want to ascribe to them. But I don't know if just saying, you know, you have the most number of nominations is the only thing that we should be discussing, because if that's the case, then we should just change the rule, and this shouldn't be leadership's responsibility. It would be a vote of the entire board. So, you know, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and if I could just say, like, I don't think that, you know, we need to count it as votes per se, but I do want to recognize it in a couple of cases. More than the majority of members of the board, so 9 members of the board of aldermen, all nominated the same person for a chairmanship in 2 different occasions. And I do think that does carry some weight if, you know, the majority, you know, overwhelming majority of folks on the board have kind of put in a nomination for a certain person for a chairmanship. I think that is something to note, because that does, I think, demonstrate that there's some consensus amongst board members, kind of who they think should, you know, chair that committee.
But
And
some
so
people nominated more than one person for the same committee chair role.
Correct.
So that it
jump in.
Alderman from the 14th.
No, I want the Alderman from the 3rd to finish. I didn't mean to cut you. Excuse me, cut you off, Alderman.
No, I was just pointing, that's not really like one person, one vote in those situations. So, you know, someone might have gotten 9 votes, but if we were treating this as a bellwether or like a 1-to-1 correlation, then I probably wouldn't have cast 3 votes in that one particular, you know, committee that you're referring to, Madam President.
Well, it's more indicative of approval voting. So who are all the people that you approve of for that committee?
So then are we going to say that Alderman Aldridge and Alderman Oldenburg got the, two most votes and public employees, and therefore they should go, we should have a renomination for that committee and have the alder people decide between those two who they would like to see chair? I mean, that's not a fair correlation.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, as we are looking at data points, I think it does, if more than a majority of members of the board all said that they approve of one person for a chairmanship, I think that is a piece of data to be just to be aware of. Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I want to kind of piggyback from the Alderwoman from the 10th, because I know this is the first time we're doing this, live. I think, leadership learned 2 years ago of, it's important to have these conversations in the public and with our colleagues. And I also want to go on record. This isn't, when we talk about this nomination process, this isn't the first time the board has done this. I remember being a new member on leadership 2 years ago, and we did this nomination process. And, some of the pushback that I'm hearing of why are we following this process now this way, as a as a new member that was barred from chairmanship because there was language in there that said if you're new that you have to wait 2 years, that made sure that 4 of us couldn't get chairmanship. But the nominations, if we go back from 2 years ago, those same nominations, as we're saying, we didn't use that as weight as votes. I mean, that's how, and I'm just going to be honest with my leadership colleague, that's how we literally did it with people nominating, the alderman from Transportation Commerce, Alderwoman for HUDs, and other members. There was a tie in certain cases where we said, hey, you're tied for these nominations, and we called alders to figure out, how to work it out. I don't think the nomination is a weighted thing, but I think it's also important to demonstrate that, this was put out there last board meeting that everyone knew that you had to send nominations in, if there was alders like the alderman from the 10th said, like people that I think would make great chairs that call their colleague and explain why they want it. I don't think that was a bad thing. I think it is a more democratic way, not just based off of years of experience. If that was the case, we could have in our rules went back to old way and just pass it off of leadership. I don't think there was an appetite for it. That's why, it didn't come up. But at the same time, I do believe that I don't want to also discredit the nomination process, because I know there are some alders that nominated themselves for multiple committees saying, hey, I'm willing to be a team player. And there were some alder people that said, hey, I think I'll be really strong in this process because maybe I have a vision to be able to move that committee forward in that way. So me personally, I will be moving in the way that with the nomination process of folks are able to send in emails and reach out to their colleagues and say which one you was interested in, but I'm not opposed to having a larger conversation of making sure that everyone's part of the team. And I think that's what we try to do by opening up the nomination process and reached out to people if they answered or didn't, to make sure that everyone's voice was kind of at the table.
Alderwoman from the 10th.
Thank you, Madam President. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. I would like to nominate Alderman Brett Narayan for Chair of Public Safety Committee.
Second.
There any discussion on that nomination? Being none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Cone,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge,
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
4 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion. Congratulations, Alderman Narayan.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman from the 10th.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm sorry. Yeah, so still thank you, Madam President, on this platform as well. I just trying to again keep us moving here. And I'm, of course, not trying to overstep anybody's need for discussion, but if I can, I would like to go ahead and nominate Alderwoman Velazquez for the Legislation and Rules Committee.
Second.
So we're not discussing anything else. We're just gonna start taking votes on all of these.
No, that's why I said if it's open for discussion, or we can make the motion. And of course, there's always discussion aligned with the motion, so.
Let's just move forward.
Any discussion on the motion?
Previous role.
I will just say that, you know, I know that Alderwoman Velazquez has been working hard on issues related to updating our charter. And I know that that's a big task of the Legislation and Rules Committee, as well as cleaning up our engrossment process, and which is also a task that that committee has to undertake. And I do think that she has already been putting in a lot of work as the vice chair of that committee over the last year, in preparation for, I think, hopefully being the chair, so that she can continue with a lot of that charter updating work that needs to happen. And so I do think that she is a good steward for that committee and has shown a dedication to it, and also was one of the folks who did have 9 different members of the board reach out with that, stating that they supported her for that. So I just wanted to put that on the record. So it's been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone.
Madam President, point of order. I think that there was a request for previous role.
Oh, was there? Sorry, I did not hear that. Hearing no objection to previous role, then I think the motion stands. Right. Any further discussion from members of the committee?
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I would like to make a motion that we nominate Clark Hubbard for the chair of HUDs.
I will second that. Any discussion on that motion? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I will say, as somebody who sat on HUD, I came in during the second half of it. We have 2 sessions, and it was one of those committees I really wanted to sit on because of the committee members, from Alderwoman Schweitzer to Alderman Browning to Alderman Cone and Alderwoman Sanier, but also due to the leadership of Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. The way that she run HUDs is one of those committees that a lot of legislation go through. You're talking about development, you're talking about a variety of things of trying to work to move our city forward. And one thing that I appreciate about Clark Hubbard is her patientness and willingness to always adjust to her colleagues. Sometimes we had to have some evening meetings because these were important issues that we were talking about, to make sure that the community also had their voices heard. Sometimes, things didn't always go right with making sure that processes was followed with board bills. So we had to have another hearing. And I'll say, even when there wasn't consensus on legislation, my bill being one of them, we had to hear 3 times before we voted it out. But Alderwoman Clark Hubbard made sure that, when we needed to have those tough decisions, that those opportunities wasn't rushed. And I just appreciate her leadership on that. And I think she's shown that she could be able to lead this committee for another 2 years. And I look forward to hopefully working with her and sitting on this committee in the future.
Alderwoman from the 10th.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I'm so sorry. Can I yield to Alderman Cone first and then come back?
Sure.
Okay.
Alderman from the 3rd.
Yeah. I also just want to pay my respects to the Alderwoman from the 10th Ward. I appreciate all of the time and effort that she puts into, chairing the committee, as someone who served on the committee with her last session. I do just want to inquire of her if she's willing.
Alderwoman from the 10th, will you yield to questioning?
Absolutely.
Alderman, you may proceed.
Alderwoman, I'm just curious, did anyone approach you in the last 24 hours and ask whether or not you would be willing to appoint a newer member to the Planning Commission on behalf of the Heads Committee?
Thank you for the question, Alderman Cone. Nobody approached me about it, but I did see Alderwoman Schweitzer comments, right, in her email to us about wanting to serve, her desire to serve on a planning commission. And again, this is one of the things that I wanted us to share since we're on this public platform, that as chairperson of HUD, you also absolutely hold a seat on the SLDC board and the Planning Commission board, of which I've taken very seriously here as my chair, in my chairmanship of HUD. I have a great, almost perfect, if not only missing one meeting on either of those, in either of those seats. But again, as everyone knows, is me always being open and available to being a team player down here for us to work together and legislate. If Alderwoman Schweitzer would want to serve on the Planning Commission, I would absolutely be open to that. As chair, you do have the opportunity, space, and authority to assign a designee, right? And so the designee is the designee of that chair. And I absolutely would trust Alderwoman Schweitzer to be that designee, but this is all our conversation that I haven't necessarily had with her yet, but I'm just saying publicly, since you asked, that I would be open to sharing that responsibility to her. And this is something that I've come through and prayed about, because quite frankly, I wasn't open to it at first, because I believe if you take responsibility, you take full responsibility. But again, in working together with us down here, if that is something that Alderwoman Schweitzer would be interested in, and I am appointed chair of HUDs, then I would absolutely be open to that. And that is the only conversation, that's the only correspondence I've had either way. I haven't had any correspondence via conversation or email about anyone else asking to be a designee.
Yeah, I'm asking partly, I think Alderwoman Schweitzer might be taken already. I had a conversation with her this morning that if I were to, be appointed to the Transportation and Commerce Chair role, that I would be willing to allow her that space at the Planning Commission as well, and have her as my delegate if I were TNC chair. But I just, one of the reasons I'm asking Alderwoman is because I've served off and on the Planning Commission for the better part of 12 years. And did so when I was a junior alderperson, because some of the senior alderpersons entrusted me with that responsibility, and it was an awesome responsibility and a really wonderful learning experience for me as a newer alderperson. And so, if you are, well, you've already been nominated for the chair of HUDs, but it would be, I think, you and I both served on the Planning Commission the past 2 years together, but I do think that it would be a good way for us to be able to allow some of our other colleagues who may not be chairs or vice chairs of committees the opportunity to learn and grow in their respective roles as well. So I just wanted to get your perspective on that, and so thank you. I do appreciate that. Would you be willing to do that, even though I've already kind of like taken Alderwoman Schweitzer out of the mix?
I think maybe we should hold that until we talk to Alderwoman Schweitzer, right? Instead of just ping ponging and tug of war on her, right? But of course, I already stated I would be open to it for her, for Alderwoman Schweitzer.
All right. Thank you, Alderwoman. I appreciate it.
Any further discussion? But I will say, I think that is a great discussion to have amongst members of the board. For those who maybe are not aware of this, the committee chairs come with a lot of responsibility outside of just chairing the committee. They often, sit on various boards and commissions. And when we consolidated the committees down from, I think, 14 down to the 7 or 8 that we have now, some of those committees, those chairs, end up having a lot of different boards that they sit on. And I think a way that we can, share leadership across the board is through some of those conversations and figuring out, you know, how other members of the board can be appointees on those committees to help share the workload, and also make sure that everybody has kind of a piece of leadership, even if they're not a committee chair. And so I appreciate that those conversations are happening, and just want to thank colleagues for you know, approaching it in that way. Back to where we are. Okay, we still have a motion on the table
Right.
for Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Is there any further discussion on that? Alderwoman from the 13th, it looks like.
I'm sorry, because I'm multitasking. I'm bouncing meeting to meeting. Did we have just one nomination for that, for HUDs?
There were several nominations that were put in, but the motion that is in front of the committee right now is to nominate Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Okay, I just.
Yes. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk,
Previous
please.
row.
Request for previous rules, seeing no objection, motion passes. Right, where are we here? Want to take up budget at this point? Hold on.
Is that where we're moving to?
I'm trying to see what, sorry, I'm having problems on my iPad here, trying to see what we've done that. Okay. Yeah, budget is next on my list here.
I nominate Alderman Aldridge for budget committee chair.
I will second that. Any further discussion? Alderman from the
So
14th.
do we have, who are all the nominees for budget? Who names submitted?
So the folks that were nominated for budget and public employees were Aldridge, Oldenburg, Schweitzer, and Clark Hubbard.
And so now each person has to nominate somebody on that list. How does that work? Because I thought you all said turn in the nominations, but that's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that Alderwoman Hubbard just said nominating Aldridge, but it was two other people that names were sent in. So how does that work?
Out of the list of people that were nominated, so those are the 4 people who are eligible to be chair of budget because they have been nominated. So Alderman Aldridge received 9 nominations. Alderman Oldenburg received 4. Alderwoman Schweitzer received 1, and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard received 1. And so from that list, the committee has to then nominate somebody to actually be that chairman. And the Alderwoman from the 10th nominated the Alderman from the 14th off of that list.
Interesting. Okay.
Alderman from the 14th, did you want to say anything?
Sure. So I'll say I appreciate the Alderwoman from the 10th nomination and your second, Madam President. So I've served on budget the last 2 years at the Board of Aldermen, and even though in a different chamber is not the same, but also served on budget for 5 years, dealing with an even bigger budget than the city of St. Louis when I was in the State House. You know, what I really appreciated the last 2 years with being on budget is always a great, unique way to really figure out, you know, every aspect of the city of St. Louis. In the last 2 years, as one of the budget members, you know, our previous budget chair, Alderwoman Spencer, I will say did a really good job walking committee members through the process and actually was able to get amendments in. And I know in my 2 years of being on budget, I was able to get several amendments, probably the most money out of all members to be able to move for different programs. For me, I want to make sure this budget committee is focused in on categories and the priorities of each different department. So making sure, it's a week of public safety, a week of health services. And I think also, even though the budget meets during kind of the first few weeks of session, I think it's also important that, that doesn't stop the budget committee from meeting throughout the whole year to make sure that we're diving into the budget throughout the year and not just at the beginning of session. So making sure that we're having conversations with departments throughout the year to know, where they strong falls and where, maybe they're not spending money, and how we can be a help from the Board of Aldermen to work with ENA and to work with departments and make sure that these funds are flowing to the right department and ensuring that the community also has input in the process. I think that's one thing that the budget committee does well, is making sure that even though ENA only have one public hearing, that the Board of Aldermen always have multiple, and that's one of the things I want to continue to do. If nominated, kicking straight off after hearing from Paul Payne, of actually hearing from the community the same day, as well as several meetings later down the budget cycle to make sure we hear from residents north and south so that their input is also part of the budget process.
There any further discussion? Any further discussion?
Madam President.
It's Alderman from the 3rd.
Thank you. Thanks, Alderman. I was one of the folks that nominated you for the chair of budget, and part of that rationale was because of your previous experience in the State House. I do just want to ask, because I have voted no on the city's budget a couple times in recent history. Because of frustrations around things like the building division not being adequately funded. And so I just want to hear your take on how we're going to handle those situations.
Thank you for that question, Alderman. So what I plan to do is, like I say, make sure that every department, and historically when departments have come into the budget committee from the Board of Aldermen, it's not kind of centralized in one department. So we may hear from public safety, may hear from county offices, we may hear from human services all in one day, instead of just having a sole focus on maybe public safety. So I really want to make sure when we have these budget meetings that and also sending out the information ahead of time, that members know, what that week is going to look like, and that we're solely going to be focusing on these departments. Now, as we know from the Board of Aldermen, we can dive deep into the budget and we can try to make changes. And I know we've advocated and we was able to do that in previous budget years to bring in more employees to, I want to say, either refuse or forestry last year. But, as much work as we do, that would be contingent on ENA. So it really depends I plan to have robust, but also timely and quick meetings so that we have enough time, if there are any changes, to make sure that they get back to ENA in enough time so that they can take those up and hopefully accept those and bring them back to the board and eventually vote on them. But it really would be, as you've been down here, it will be contingent on if ENA were to accept, some of the changes that I know we all care about at the Board of Aldermen, making sure that they're staffed up, which I think will be conversations with personnel to make sure that they actually have the ability to make sure that they are hiring hiring enough people for these positions as well. So that will hopefully be my plan moving forward with the budget committee.
Yeah, I guess the other facet to that, Alderman, that I'm curious about, because this isn't just budget, it's budget and public employees. And so the pay bill comes through this committee. So there's a lot of authority, vested in this particular committee to do that work. And I know we oftentimes say that ENA, has to approve the budget, which they do. But there have been chairs that have been successful in getting amendments, pretty significant amendments through with respect to the budget. And, you know, in some cases we've had, you know, chairs and the Board of Aldermen can't even come to an agreement on a budget sometimes. But, you know, I think to your point, you know, and what I experienced last session, uh, you know, my point that I made earlier with the building division, um, I was told that, you know, the reason that we didn't take up more discussion around the building division was because the commissioner or director of the building division at the time said that they didn't need any more staff, which we know that buildings aren't getting inspected. The building commissioner came before us, not the current one, the former commissioner came before us and said that they are not doing citywide inspections anymore. Those citywide inspections are critical to address vacancy. They're critical to address quality housing, you know, getting building permits issued. They're just absolutely critical for a number of reasons, and they're not being done. And not the least of which of those issues is that if we're not doing inspections on a regular basis, the quality of housing goes down, our taxes go down, and 60% of the revenue that's collected through those real estate taxes goes to our public schools. So we are literally robbing our St. Louis public schools by not funding our building division adequately. So I'm optimistic that with you as chair, you would be, oh, I'm getting feedback, sorry. That we would be able to address those concerns. So I hope that I have your commitment to working through that together as well.
Yes, and I know, like I will say, in the last 2 years of being on budget, those are some of the same concerns that, you know, when it comes to the building division, I think people forget that building is, you know, under public safety, and it's critical to make sure that, I won't say, let me just say, it's critical to make sure that we invest within that department. I think, like you say, when the department say no, and if the board says yes, and you know, Paul Payne will eventually talk with ENA to say, well, either they're gonna be able to fill this position or not. I will commit to you that, you know, I'm gonna dive deep into this budget and advocate not only based on the budget, but like you say, public employees, and to make sure that we can do everything to try to, from the board of aldermen, be the check and balance to make sure that those positions are there. But when it comes to amendments, I know a little some about that because I brought in about a half meal last year working with the circuit attorney's office to make sure that they had funding for that department. And I think, you know, the timeline of making sure those amendments are into ENA to get back to the budget committee, to get to the floor, and then that bill to get to the mayor's office is critical. So timeline is already on my radar, as well as, you know, like I say, diving deep into the budget to try to do as much as we can from the Board of Aldermen level, not just at the start, but throughout this whole year.
Thank you, Alderman. I apologize. I got a little distracted. They brought an embarrassingly beautiful bouquet of flowers from my boyfriend into my office while you were responding to my question. So forgive me. A little delayed. I think they were for my birthday last week. But thank you for that commitment, Alderman. I do appreciate it. I don't have any further questions, Madam President.
Thank you. Alderman Aldridge, I do have one question. You know, as you know, Budget Committee is a very time-intensive committee, especially during budget season. That committee, per the charter, has to meet daily until that budget is approved, which you know, with the exception of weekends, although I know there's often community budget hearings on weekends. Can you just kind of talk to your availability and to, you know, be able to hold those hearings every day, to do that work? Do you hold another job that, you know, could impact your ability to be there for long hours at a time, you know, every single day?
Yeah, no, this is my only, you know, I was one of those people that, you know, was wanting to go out for budget and reached out to my colleagues. So I ensure that, you know, my time commitment, just like the last 2 years of being on budget, you know, was committed to that time. So if become budget chair, I'm committed to, you know, making sure that we have meetings during the daytime that I'm able to be there. If we have to have some in the afternoon, as well as some in the weekend, like we have done with the community, I will, I'm committed to doing it. I've been committed to doing it the last 2 years.
Thank you, Alderman. With that, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, it had been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Cone,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge, President Green,
Aye.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge,
Aye.
4 aye votes.
For your vote, you sustain the motion. Alderwoman from the 10th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the committee. I'd like to nominate Alderman Browning for the Public Infrastructure and Utilities Committee.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
We'll open it up to the committee for discussion, or I see Alderwoman from the 1st has her hand raised too. So Alderwoman from the 1st.
Thank you. If no one on the committee needs to speak, I've been chairing, thank you, Madam President and members of the committee. I've been chairing this committee for the last 2 years, and Alderman Browning has been acting as my co-chair, vice chair, but really co-chair is maybe a more appropriate way of describing him. He has been really a right-hand person on this committee and somebody that works really hard to work on every single of the initiatives that I brought forward. This past session, he was right there helping out and working on it. And while I obviously hope to be on this committee in the next few weeks, I think that I see it as a time to allow for someone else to have this leadership position, and is something that, while, of course I loved being this chair, and if the committee thought, they really needed me to do it, then I obviously would, but I think that Alderman Browning would do a fantastic job, and I wanted to make sure that, someone who nominated him, that he would have a chance to be considered after so much hard work on this committee. And especially as we move to the Department of Transportation taking shape, and all the work that will need to happen to make sure that that gets off the ground in the best way possible. So I think that it would be a great decision by this committee to have him as the chair of Public Infrastructure and Utilities.
You, Alderwoman from the 1st. Any further discussion? Alderman for the 14th.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I second everything that, the Alderwoman from the 1st said. I think that's why this, process is so unique. You have an alderman like Alderman Browning, who may be more newer, but when it comes to just the way that he dives in and his willingness to look at our public infrastructure and utilities as a whole, I think is critical that you have those individuals at the board who are really committed and, have kind of that best expertise, regardless of years of serving on this committee. Alderwoman Schweitzer has done an amazing job on that committee. Her and Alderman Browning, work very great to make sure that we have a open view of what our streets look like, our utility companies look like. They do it so well that they loved it so much that I had to get off of it, because they really got into the weeds of it. But those are the type of people that, I think you need to serve in these on these committees when it comes to making sure that we have the right folks really diving into those areas. And I just also want to give a shout out to Alderwoman Schweitzer. I think it shows leadership. She is more senior than Alderman Browning, and she could have said, because I've been here longer, I deserve this. But she was willing to work with her colleagues, and I'm sure she'll probably be vice president or vice chair on the committee, work with her colleagues to figure out how we all can work together for the betterment of the city of St. Louis. So I am excited for this pick, and I want to tell Alderman Browning, I look forward to working with him on this, and Alderman Schweitzer, because you guys have really, kicked butt to make sure that we look at public infrastructure and utilities in a 21st century way, which has been difficult with something that's so important. So thank you both.
Any further discussion? I will just say ditto to everything that the Alderwoman from the 1st and Alderman from the 14th said, so as not to belabor the point and move us along, but I am really grateful for the work that Alderman Browning's been doing on trying to build out Proposition T and help us as we transition over to a Department of Transportation. And I think that'll be an important chairmanship kind of going forward. So if there's no further discussion, there's been a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Cone,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge,
Aye.
President Green,
Aye.
4 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion. All right, the last one that we have is transportation and commerce. Is that correct?
I'm
Yes.
sorry, Madam President, we still have, which I was just gonna ask to do to nominate, we still have the special committee on what St. Louis has a lot of, which is red tape.
Red tape.
So,
Okay.
so, if I could, I'd like to make the motion to nominate Alderwoman Slicer for chair of the special committee on red tape.
Can we amend that pending the authorization of that committee, which should happen tomorrow?
Okay. I'd like to withdraw that motion and make the motion pending authorization by resolution tomorrow that Alderwoman Slicer be chair of the special committee on red tape.
Second.
Is there any discussion on this? Alderwoman Schweitzer, do you want to say anything?
Thank you so much, Madam President and members of the committee. I appreciate the nomination and would be excited to do the work of getting into this topic. Thank you for your time.
Any further discussion? Seeing none,
Previous
there's
row.
motion and a second as previous roll. Hearing no objection to previous roll, motion passes.
I'm sorry, President Green, who seconded that motion? Thank you.
Yeah. All right, last committee then is transportation and commerce. So it's down basically between kind of two folks who don't, currently have assignments to committee. This was the most even split of committees because Alderwoman Schweitzer had 2, Alderman Oldenburg had 2, Alderman Cone had 2, Alderman Browning had 1. And we will take Browning and Schweitzer out of the running, given that they have already been assigned to committees. So with that, I will open it up for discussion and/or a motion from the committee.
I'm prepared to make a motion, but I did see Alderman, unless we want to go into discussion, because the only reason I'm asking is because of how you said it was split, and I did see Alderman Oldenburg turn his video on, so I didn't know if he was wanting to speak or.
No, I'm happy to defer to the leadership's wisdom here on what motion needs to come forward next. I've served with Alderman Cone for 8 or 9 years now, and he's an excellent individual. I got no problem with him. And with that being said, why don't you just make a motion for him to chair the TNC committee, and I'll catch you all on the flip.
Thank you, Alderman Oldenburg.
Not the flip.
You, Alderman Oldenburg, well, that made our job easy. With that, I nominate Alderman Cone as chair of the Transportation and Commerce Committee.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Just so I'm clear, because I know, Alderman Cone, you had asked Alderwoman Clark Hubbard about planning and zoning, and I know, you have had interest of last session of, like you say, deferring it to another member. do you have, I guess after the conversation with you and Alderwoman Schweitzer, is that something you plan to work with her on so that, you know, we can share leadership roles when it comes to planning and zoning for that committee?
You know, I do agree with the alder lady from the 10th that when we accept leadership and responsibility, we should do it wholly. But I have also been the beneficiary of gracious leadership in the past with respect to other senior alderpersons when I was a newly tenured alder, allowing me the opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, to participate on the planning commission. And as I spoke with the alderwoman from the first ward this morning, I shared that with her, and I would be more than happy to afford her that same opportunity. And then the alder lady from the 10th and I can argue about it later.
I just know, as you know, that the interest, I know that was one of the things last session, you said you was willing to already kind of pass it on to somebody. So if you get it again, I was, just curious if you're still in that same headspace.
Alderman, there are reasons and seasons for everything. And, as I talked to the president last night, we all have lives. There's health, family, all sorts of things that happen outside of these four walls that drive those decisions. And so, but as I've mentioned several times now, I've already had that conversation with the alderwoman from the first, and I'm happy to move forward as I've committed.
Is there
That's
any
all I had,
further,
Alderman. That's all.
any further discussion? Then seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Cone,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge,
Aye.
President Green,
Aye.
4 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion. That concludes the discussion of committee chairs. Is there any written testimony?
No.
Right? Any announcements from members of the committee? Seeing none, all members are present. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor
Roll.
signify by saying aye. There's been a request
Aye.
for roll, no objection. We are adjourned.